Who's back?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Godwin, and I want to welcome you to the press briefing by the leader of the opposition, and he is also accompanied today by the Member of Parliament for Central Kingston. Today, we will first allow for them to make comments, and after that, we will take questions from members of the media who are present with us. At this time, I am going to turn over to the leader of the New Democratic Party, the leader of the opposition, Dr. the Honorable Godwin.
Thank you very much, Lavon, and good morning to everyone. Particular good morning and welcome to the members of the media for being here, accepting our invitation to participate in this event. I'm going to focus in my remarks on three very important subject matters that we have been concerned about recently and continue to be concerned about and need to be concerned about as a society. One is the recent appointment of Mrs. Deborah Charles as the Clerk of the House. I know I've addressed it elsewhere, but I think it's important that we present it here and have the people understand better what the matters are that are involved, why is this such an important issue. The second issue is the National Insurance Service, the NIS, which is a matter of grave importance to all of us and something that we in the New Democratic Party take very seriously and have always done. And then thirdly, of course, the matter that is perhaps uppermost in people's minds, and that is the situation of crime and violence in our country. Most of the people I speak with know that is what the conversation starts with. And then, of course, we get back to bread and butter issues, electricity, phone bill, gas bill, so forth. So I begin. Now, on the matter of the appointment of the Clerk of the House, Deborah Charles as Clerk of the House. In June 2023, Mrs. Deborah Alexander Charles was appointed to the position of Clerk of the House of Assembly in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The appointment has been condemned in many quarters and for various reasons, yet the appointment remains in effect. The appointment of Deborah Charles to that position is a blatant disregard for established practice and the constitutional requirement of the position of clerk. I raised the matter during the last sitting of the House of Assembly held at Calico on July 13th. There I objected to Mrs. Charles's appointment to the position of Clerk of the House as not being a suitable person to hold that position, given the nature of the position and her own political activism on behalf of the governing ULP. I also informed the House of Assembly then that I had written to the chairman of the Public Service Commission, because the position was an appointment by the Public Service Commission, stating my concerns and urging reconsideration of the decision to appoint Mrs. Charles to that position and urging the revocation of that appointment. Now, the Public Service Commission, Your Honor, is an independent body. I can't tell them what to do. But as a concerned citizen, as a member of Parliament, As the leader of the opposition, I am entitled to raise my concerns and say what I think ought to be done in this very important matter. If I were not to do so and were to stay silent, I would not be doing my duty in those roles. And of course, the highest role is that of citizen. This is not a personal attack on Mrs. Charles, as the Prime Minister Gonzalez tried to make it out to be in the Parliament on the 13th of July when I raised the matter. It is a matter of public concern, public interest in ensuring that our democratic institutions are protected and that they function effectively for all of us. So why is this matter important to all of us? First of all, we are a country of laws. We repeat these things, we say them, we pay lip service. Many people, they pay lip service to this requirement, and frequently they fail to act in a manner consistent with that sacred principle. Some of the worst offenders are in the present government. First, it is important to note that the position of Clerk of the House of Assembly is a position required by the Constitution of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the highest law of the land. In Section 35 of the Constitution, it states that there shall be a Clerk of the House. Shall be a Clerk of the House. It further states that the office of the clerk and the offices of the members of the staff of the clerk shall be public officers. Public officers. The appointment is done by the Public Service Commission, and the holder of the office has a duty to be impartial in the performance of the duties of that office. To perform the duties appropriately, the holder must not only be impartial, but must be seen to be so. The appearance must be so. There should be no doubt or question as to the impartiality and professionalism of the position of Clerk of the House. We've never had to question that or raise any concern about that in all the 22 years I've been a member of Parliament, and I'm sure prior to that, because those principles were generally respected. The clerk is also critical to the functioning of our Parliament, and under the Constitution has the very important role, a very important role to play in the moving of a motion of no confidence against the government. As you know, the moving of a motion of no confidence is a major undertaking or principle under our Constitution. When a motion of no confidence is moved in the House, the Speaker is required to see that the House meets and dispose of the motion. If the Speaker does not do so within 21 days, then it falls to the clerk. The clerk has a duty to call a special meeting of the House at a time and place that she says, or he says, so that the motion could be debated and disposed of. This is provided for in Section 47(2) of our Constitution. Remember that a motion of no confidence in the government, if it passes, could result in the end of the government. So it is critically important that where the Speaker fails to bring it on to be disposed of, that the clerk would act in accordance with the law and have the motion debated. This is a constitutional duty. We all in the country, in the parliament, especially the opposition, need to know that that sacred constitutional duty would be respected and would be carried out without fear or doubt as to how the clerk might perform in those circumstances. We know from fairly recent experience in our parliament during the life of this ULP regime, how the government can misinterpret and disregard the constitution and the standing order so as to prevent a motion of no confidence from being debated in the parliament. That has become well known throughout the region, because we have not been quiet on it, that in the Parliament of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the government has argued that a motion of no confidence can't go ahead unless they agree to it. And the Speaker at that time conceded. The clerk, however, when it comes to her, she has a role to play. In such an important matter, we cannot have doubts about the impartiality and professionalism of the clerk. We cannot fear that political loyalty to the ruling party may impair her judgment and prevent her from doing her duty. I think that is a reasonable position for anyone in the parliament, and certainly anyone who understands our system of government, and most of our people do. It is an important principle to be upheld. I use the present tense to say that Deborah Charles is a political activist for the ULP. We all know that she was a candidate for the ULP in the last election, that is just 2020, in 2020. She ran against Daniel Cummings in West Kingston twice and lost twice. She is still the caretaker for the ULP in that seat, as far as I know, as no replacement has yet been declared. She sat in Parliament on the government side as a senator leading up to the last general elections, a mere 2.5 years ago. Yet, last month, she was appointed to be Clerk of the House. Could she not find a less sensitive and critical position to hold following her electoral defeat and termination as a senator? When I raised the objection in the House, the Speaker was quick to praise the clerk's diligence and professionalism. Clearly, she did not give much consideration to the objections I had raised, nor did the Prime Minister, for that matter, as he sought to diminish the significance of the concerns I raised. I said that I use the present tense to say that Deborah Clark is a political activist for the ULP, because she currently operates a Facebook page under the banner of the ULP and continues to post as recently as last week on this matter, on this page, under the banner of the ULP. I think we can show it just to ensure that members of the media can access it and see what I'm talking about. This is simply unacceptable. It is shameful to see that a month ago, more than a month ago, this appointment was made. I raised the objection in the House. Others have raised the objection publicly. And yet, she continues to operate as normal, as a partisan political activist for the ULP. Her appointment and her conduct in that regard is rubbing salt into the wounds, in a sense. It's a flagrant disregard for what is proper and how the office of clerk ought to be regarded and how it behaves. It brings the office of clerk into disrepute and undermines the integrity of the House of Assembly. Her appointment of clerk and continued activism for her party, the ULP, has the potential to undermine how the House functions and thus weaken our democratic processes. Reasoning: how can members of the opposition go to Mrs. Charles for assistance as the clerk when she continues to campaign for the ULP on her Facebook page and in other activities, and only recently was on the other side of the House, essentially combating members of the opposition on our side? It is not reasonable to expect us to disregard our recent roles and continued political activism in the ULP and now see her as an impartial public officer. It's not reasonable to expect people to do that. Most reasonable people, if not all, would say that this creates a very serious question as to the impartiality of the clerk. The appointment puts the House in a bad light by casting a shadow of political partisanship over the office. And it will have a negative impact on the work of the opposition in the House. I am glad to see that recently the Public Service Union has put out a statement condemning the appointment and calling for it to be revoked. I think it is not fair for career public servants, and I'm sure that the union, the Public Service Union, can represent them ably, but I do not think it is fair for career public servants to see that a ULP activist is parachuted into a position, a plum position, that many of them might have aspired to hold it. It must be demoralizing to public servants who have that aspiration and see that it's just simply taken away without a chance to fairly compete. As I said before, I have written to the chairman of the Public Service Commission about the matter. That was since on the 13th of July. Sadly, I have not yet received a reply to my letter, even an acknowledgement, but I expect it will come soon. In the meantime, I reiterate here my desire that the appointment of Deborah Charles to the position of Clerk of the House of Assembly be revoked. That is the position of the opposition members of the Parliament. That is necessary to ensure that public confidence in that important office and the institutions of our system of government is maintained. And we know how badly shaken the public confidence has been in the way our Parliament functions in recent times. So, we will continue to raise this matter because it continues to be a sore point, as nothing has been done to address the problems that have been raised by members of the media. I've seen in an editorial of one of the leading newspapers here. I've heard also from the Public Service Union in their statement. I've seen commentary from writers in the various news media, which tells me that this is a troubling matter for many people. and it must be addressed. Now, I want to turn quickly to the NIS problem. I have spoken on this matter for quite some time. In fact, we have spoken as a party on this matter for a long time. And we have done so consistently, recognizing the importance, the critical importance of the National Insurance Service to our country, to the well-being of our people. But the NIS is in trouble. That is not hyperbole, it's not exaggeration. It is what the executive director, Mr. Stuart Haynes, said pretty much in his statements publicly when he initiated his consultations on the matter last year. Those consultations ultimately, eventually, were held with us, after, I guess, everybody else had been consulted. The opposition were last, or very close to last on the list. The warnings were sounded several years ago, but apparently were not heeded by the government. As things stand, according to the actuary, the NIS is set to run out of money in 2034, or by 2034. In one budget address after another, the finance minister acknowledged the problem, talked tough, but did nothing. I'll give you an example. In the 2020 budget address, this is what the minister said. He said in 2018 and 2019 budget speeches, the government highlighted the urgency of pension reform in the near term. In 2018, the budget listed 6 options for pension reform in an attempt to initiate public debate on the issue. The response was tepid. That's what they say in the budget. People, I guess they say people don't care. Last year, I'm quoting still, we established a pension reform steering committee of senior officials and mandated them to study the problem, make recommendations to government, and manage the public consultation process. In 2020, the committee engaged, or the committee will engage extensively with stakeholders and the general public as we attempt to both educate and learn from others about the most efficient way to implement pension reform. In recent consultations with leaders of the labor movement, the government was encouraged by the willingness to engage frankly and constructively on the issue. And it says by year's end, as 2020, we hope to have arrived at a common understanding on how necessary reforms will be implemented. But we're still not there. We're still going through that process. We still have to wait on the government to act. In the executive summary, as you know, we have spoken about the actuarial study or review that is to be conducted every 3 years under the legislation. Given to us in the Parliament on the 13th of July. This is after years of calling for information from the NIS on the situation, the status of the NIS. The law requires that this be laid in Parliament when it is prepared. This is the first one we have, and this is the 11th. This is the first one we have a copy of. So, in the executive summary of this actual review, it is stated at page 2, and I quote, "None of the contribution and benefit related recommendations in the report of the 10th actuarial review," that's the one before this one, "were made during the review period." I repeat that. None of the contribution and benefit related recommendations in the report of the 10th actuary review were made during the review period. And that is at page 2 of the actuarial, the 11th actuarial review of the National Insurance Fund. And that review period, it says that none of the recommendations were implemented. That review period was from 2017, 2018, 2019, that 3-year period. The crisis at the NLS jeopardizes the pensions of all of its members, with serious financial and economic implications for the whole society. So it's not just the people who are paying into NIS and who expect to get the pension that will be affected. If the NIS is no longer able to perform in the way that is required, all of us, everybody will feel the effect, the negative effect of it. The current situation threatens to shred our most important economic safety net, that is the NIS. Most pensioners, I believe the executive director said that up to about 85% of pensioners have no other source of income during their retirement. They rely on the NIS. This means that the NIS is the only lifeline in retirement. Of course, some people get a little change from abroad and so forth, or continue to find employment elsewhere, do something to catch their hand. But this is the only regular source of income that they receive is from their NIS pension. This means that the NIS is the only lifeline. It means that it must survive. It means that it must be made healthy again. That is something that we have to agree on as a society, and certainly we in the Democratic Party, we came to that position a very long time ago. It has to exist. In fact, our plan is even to expand into national health insurance for our people. But we'll deal with that at another time. How did the NIS get to this point of crisis? The government must take responsibility for it. They failed to act when they were advised to do so. Even in their own budget addresses, they acknowledge that. And here I quoted from the executive summary of the 11th actuarial review, where it said that the recommendations from the previous one were still not implemented. So they delayed and postponed action that would have made it easier to conduct reforms had they been done in a timely manner, and would have averted the current crisis. They put politics ahead of the welfare of pensioners by giving the impression that things were not as bad as they seem. They did so, for example, in the 2020 manifesto, when they said to voters then that the 11th actuarial review, which was coming up, would likely result in improved pensions and other benefits. That's what they said. That it would likely result. That is the actuarial, this document that is, they say now is a doomsday scenario, if we don't do something drastic. No. They said in 2020, going into the election, that after this comes out, we will likely have a better or improved pension and other benefits coming out of this, and that it would point the way forward. With that assessment, presumably to greener pastures. So you want to tell me the 2010, as I quoted earlier, the 10th actuarial review, which said pretty much the same thing as this. They had it in their possession, yet they go into the election and telling people that the next one that's coming, that they're going to likely have improved pension benefits.
Imagine that.
Imagine that indeed. They knew better when they promised that which I read there, because the previous actuarial review, as I said, had made similar findings. I don't have that review because we don't have the 10th, we don't have the 9th, we don't have any other. This is the only one we have. And I'll tell you why they decided to put it out. So I don't have the review from 2010, the 10th annual, the 10th actual review. Although Parliament is required to have it under the law. But in this current review, this is the 11th actual review. It says at page 3, after looking at the projections going forward, this is what it says. It says these results are similar to those in the 10th actuarial review. And once again, this is their words, once again show that the fund is not financially sustainable over the medium and long terms at the current benefit provisions on and contribution rate. That's at page 3. It's in the executive summary, easy to find. So they are saying that what they put, what was there, and I think it's the same people that the actuarial study, the 10th actuarial review. What they're saying is the same thing we have here. They had this since the 2010 one, and yet you go into an election telling people that you're likely going to have better benefits. And you continue essentially to kick the can down the road without treating it with the level of seriousness, and all of a sudden it is the most serious matter that we are confronted with. The actuarial review calls, that is the current one, for action seriously. And I'll give you, for those of you who don't have a copy. This is what it says. With the National Insurance Fund projected to be depleted in less than 15 years, meaningful changes are urgently required. We would expect that these same recommendations were in the previous one, because they said the conditions were the same, the findings were the same. Even if, I'm quoting again, even if all the recommendations made above are fully accepted and implemented by January 2022, we are now in 2023. We are now at the stage where another actuarial review is supposed to come out soon. Because the last one was 2017, 18, 19. It's to be done every 3 years. We are 2021, 22. To quote in, even if all the recommendations made above are fully accepted and implemented by January 2022, additional contribution rate increases will be required to ensure the continued payment of benefits without government support. Policymakers should therefore not depend on hoped for results, but instead adopt rational responses to the specific challenges that lie ahead. And hoped for, compound word, is in inverted commas. I wonder where it was taken from, because usually when you quote them like that, it's taken from somewhere. So they must not depend on hoped for results, but basically take action, reasonable action. Implementing the above recommendations will not be easy for the government to make and for the stakeholders to accept. It is therefore recommended that extensive consultation be held with the stakeholders and the board, and that the board publish audited financial statements and actuarial review reports during such consultation. In fact, in this report, they said at point number 13 of the recommendations that this report should be placed on the NIS website. Underneath that, I scroll, I said all the reports should be on the NIS website. Check the NIS website now and see if it's there. That was done. This was written 31st of August, 2021, I believe. If you check today, you will see it's still not on the NIS website. That was 2.5 years ago. 2 years ago that it was done. So the writers of the review They knew that the government had not been making reports available to the public. They had not been transparent with the public. So now that the situation is dire, they're urging transparency and consultation. Before now, the NIS was run like a hermit kingdom. No actuarial reports laid in the parliament, although required by law. Board appointments secretive and opaque. The last financial statement, audited financial statement, on their website dates back to 2020. And the actuary prepared this report dated August 31st, 2021. And still, the recommendation, a simple thing like that, is putting this document so that you, the journalists, and everybody in our society can have a look at it themselves. It's still not on the website. I want to call again that the document be placed on the website immediately, urgently. That the report that they also will get from the World Bank that they said that they have received, that has studied this document, be likewise put there. That the audited financial statements be put up to date on the website. People need to know what the condition of their NIS is. This is not a matter for the board. This is not a matter for government. This is all of us who are in jeopardy if this thing is not dealt with effectively. So now that there's a mess that must be cleaned up, the all-inclusive approach is recommended to be adopted. Given the great importance of the NIS to our well-being, we in the NDP and the opposition will play our part and continue to be constructive. That has always been our approach to the NIS. As Arnhem Eustace has taught us to treat this matter with utmost seriousness and sincerity. And never underestimate the impact that he had in the sincerity that he brought to this matter. However, and this is the key thing, the government holds all the cards. Therefore, the government has a responsibility to present its plan for the NIS to the nation. They have repeated actuarial reviews. They now have a report from the World Bank that studied this review. They have had consultations. The time for dithering is over. The government has a responsibility to present its plan for the NIS to the nation. There has been more than enough hand-wringing by successive finance ministers, and the proverbial can has already been kicked far enough down the road. You might say it's been kicked off the road. They want to lead, so they must take the lead on this vital matter. Our future, quite literally, depends on it. Whether many will descend into poverty or enjoy a decent standard of living in their retirement. That is how critically important it is. Now I turn to the issue of crime and violence. And I'm not going to get into much detail. My colleague here, the Honorable Jacinta Alikop, will also speak on this matter because, as you know, he's our shadow minister on this matter and somebody with a lot of experience in dealing with such matters. Crime and violence are out of hand in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. If there is any doubt of that, the terrible carnage that we saw in Kingstown last Wednesday night would dispel any such doubt. We are just past the middle of the year and we have 35 killings in St. Vincent, most by gunshot. At this rate, we will break, St. Vincent and Grenadines will break the record for killings that was set just last year, that is 42. And we'll have, at this rate, over 50 homicides this year. Now we hope, by some miracle, it does not continue that way. Because every time it happens, some family grieves, somebody loses a life, somebody loses a loved one. That is simply unacceptable. The trend now is simply unacceptable. The people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines are suffering because crime and violence continues to increase in our communities. They are frightened and have retreated into their homes. Check out the night spots and you will see that yourself. Sometimes it's because people don't have money, yes, but a lot of it is people are afraid. They just can't be bothered. They say, let me just stay home safe, keep myself quiet. People need to believe that they can change things. They need to feel empowered. This can only come from being together and working together. Several weeks ago, Prime Minister Gonsalves said that they were working on a plan to deal with the situation, but as of yet, still no plan has been presented to the nation. As leader of the opposition, I am calling on our people to come together for a time of prayer for our nation. A national vigil, so to speak. We need this very badly. We need each other, the support of one another, very badly. I am calling, I've said it elsewhere, but I repeat it here. I am calling on the churches, church leaders, civil society leaders, including trade union leaders, business leaders, men and women of decency and courage to come together. I invite the government, including the Prime Minister and Minister of National Security, to join us in such a rally in Kingston. I invite the police, including the Commissioner of Police, to be a part of such a rally in Kingston. Let us all come together and pray for peace and healing in our land. At Heritage Square in Kingston, next week, Thursday. The churches and religious leaders. This is not a time for division and rancor. It is a time for healing and hope. It is a time to appeal to our better natures, even in those committing the offenses. And I speak here not only of murders and other violent crimes, but also the widespread stealing of farmers, crops, and animals, home break-ins, yacht break-ins, sexual assaults, and domestic violence. All are way out of bounds in our country. This is a time for creating security and peace, not so that we can build a prosperous country by the grace of God, where all of us have a place in that country and a share in that prosperity. This requires all of us working together on realistic plans and practical solutions to this serious problem of violent crime in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. For one thing, I've said this before, I'll repeat it. It is time that there be a separate Minister of National Security, not the Prime Minister, to be in charge or to be charged specifically with dealing with this serious and deteriorating problem in our country, and to focus on the problem and solutions. Also, the present Commissioner of Police has overseen a time of increasing gun violence and killings in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I give everybody the benefit of the doubt. He may have done his best to address the problem, but that has not been good enough to improve the situation. So the time has come to have a new Commissioner of Police who is better suited to meet the challenges at hand. This move would signal a new seriousness to tackle the problem of crime and violence in our society and give our people hope that relief is on the way. More of the same cannot accomplish that. I will now invite my colleague.
Thank you very much, Dr. Friday. Let me thank the members of the media present and that is in the room who are participating in this important media and press conference. You would excuse me if I just quickly refer and refresh our minds on two important things that I took away from Dr. Friday's presentation. One, that the government of the day was manifestly untruthful to the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines when in their 2020 manifesto, they presented to the nation that things will get better in terms of the pension provisions in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. In fact, as has been succinctly presented by the President of the Democratic Party here this morning, we are now faced with a situation in which contributors would be required to pay more over the next few years. I want to underscore that. Would be required to pay more. And at the same time, they will be expected to receive less. That is, the pension provisions will move from a 60% benefit down to a 55% benefit. Further,
And that's their recommendation.
they will have to take a longer time to receive benefits. Progressively, it will reach the age of 67. The average life in St. Vincent is 73 point something, although I am told now by the UN it's 74. Many people are in fact dying before 67 in St. Vincent. So they will pay more, receive less, and take longer to receive their benefits. And if those provisions of life expectancy is as they are, then there's not a lot of life left after you have received that pension. People can do that maths. The fact is, however, that the government lied to the nation. The second takeaway that at least I have received there from the very important presentation is that the government is not only unconstitutional in its conduct in not presenting as is required the NS reports every 3 years to the Parliament, but more importantly, does not believe in the important role of an opposition in the Parliament or in the life of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. In fact, the Prime Minister notoriously indicated at a regional conference that you should not listen to the opposition. And it seems that it's only because their backs are now against the wall that they are trying to find some accommodation or use, is a better expression, the opposition as an accomplice to the crime of abuse of the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Our people certainly have to take note of that. To address my crying comments, I also depart from the recommendation of the leader of the opposition that civil society, and expressly the church, has a role to play. And while I will not give the details, I draw attention to an article in the Guardian newspaper of our neighbor Trinidad and Tobago as recent as March of this year from the Mahasaba. And it is reflected thus: religious boards and churches are doing their utmost to help fight crime. That's in Trinidad and Tobago. Religious boards, churches are doing their utmost to help fight crime in Trinidad and Tobago. I do not think we have any similar statement in the Grenadines. In fact, it's unlikely we may have such a statement. But at least our neighbors recognize that civil role and that they are partners in the crime fight. This morning I thought I would be anecdotal in my response on crime by sharing again with you, members of the media, and those in radio lands, from our neighbors in Trinidad and Tobago, who certainly have a much larger police service than ours, are better endowed, better resourced, and in fact have changed their name from the police force to a police service, something we may want to take guidance on. And I share with you in a little detail an article in which a superintendent of police in Trinidad and Tobago was reporting to the nation, and his advice in that presentation was that parents should take charge of their children. In fact, that's the caption. And I read very quickly and slow down where it's necessary. A scolding for the Yogo Martin residents as the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, TTPS, pleaded with parents to take charge of their homes if they are truly serious about tackling gang violence and juvenile delinquency. At a Western Division Town meeting on Wednesday at the Central Yogo Martin Community Center, residents complained to the police about a wide range of issues, from a lack of patrols to issues with garbage, fireworks, and loud music. However, when asked what the TTPS is doing to arrest gang violence and young people joining gangs, Assistant Commissioner of Police ACP Collis Hayes asked what they were doing to control their children. And he went on to say, since when can't we talk to our children? Since when can't we tell them how to behave and how to conduct themselves? Since when do we allow our children to reach our homes after 9 o'clock in the night, and then there's nobody accountable for too? Where have we gone as a society? As a person, you couldn't do that when you were young. So why are you allowing it now? He asked loudly. He went on. Hazel said, while the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has projects to guide young people, I think we should pay attention to that. While the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has projects to guide young people, it is not the police's job to raise them. You are the parents of your children and your children's children, and you have a responsibility in order to take care of your children. And for far too long, when the parents have failed, the children has failed, the school has failed, society leaves the responsibility to the police and the justice system. Tonight, West, and I'm putting it squarely on the parents of these communities to ensure that we return to the bargaining table, he said, to light applause. The Assistant Commissioner of Police reminded those in attendance that they brought their children into the world and they can't shy away from their responsibility. He added, we have 97 police-run youth clubs throughout Trinidad and Tobago. In those 97, we have to find 97 police officers from our pool to work with those young people in order to shape those young people so that they can be better catalysts for change. However, we don't do it alone. We do it with teachers and leaders from the community who are together in order to deal with certain social issues in order to prevent social decay. He told those in attendance that recently the Trinidad Police Service has realized that things operate in a concentric circle. So he said, in the failure of our society is the parenting, the schools, and some of the outreach programs. Children are placed before the courts, police officers will charge and put them before the courts. The judiciary puts it right squarely back now in the hands of the police, who in recent times are sending them back to police clubs for assistance. I skip a paragraph and go to an important comment. The Assistant Police Commissioner said, it is important for parents to understand the different work within society. Hence, the reason we are asking for equal partnership. And then he concluded, we can be firm, but not harsh. We can love without inflicting punishment. But clearly, there has to be responsibility and role that parents need to play in assisting our youth. Don't join gangs, join groups, he said. I find that there's much resonance by the comments of the Assistant Commissioner of Police in the prescriptive and seminal position that we, going back to USS's years, had taken in the New Democratic Party when we promoted what was called then a social, spiritual, and redemption charter, which was a preventative approach to crime and violence, rather than a reactive approach, which still appears to be the direction of the regime of today. I emphasize again, preventative. And yes, one gathers clearly in that report that there's no quick fix, there's no simple solution, and that many stakeholders have to be on board and involved in order for us to effectively address the question of crime and violence in our societies. I want to draw attention to a most important fundamental here. Trinidad and Tobago is easily richer than all of the rest of the Eastern Caribbean put together. In fact, some economists say the rest of the Caribbean combined. If that's in fact so, and in a country which also has a very low unemployment rate, we can easily come to a recognition that crime is not necessarily a linear, a straight line relationship between monies and activities. It is, better put, a measure of all of the engines of society building a nation for better outcomes. That is an understanding and an undertaking that resides well with us in the New Democratic Party. We must look at the economic, we must look at the social, we must look at the spiritual. We must attend to all of the building blocks. The child comes from a home, that's their parents. They go to a school to be socialized. They attend churches for even more formation, and they become members of the wider society to build a culture of decency and moral courage. All of those facets must be at work here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I deliberately extract from another newspaper of the same day, which presented some questions on crime. I will not bore you by taking it through it, but I want to draw attention, members of the media, to a particular paragraph that is germane to where we are in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Any attempt at improving the police presence and responses to crime through exercises and other short-term measures without a wholesale improvement in the attitude of all police officers towards public safety and security will likely produce issues temporal, results of the cosmetic support and so on and so forth. I'm not interested in all of this language. We expressly want to draw attention to, because I want us this morning to walk away with a distinction. The reference to public safety. The issue of crime and violence is much more a matter of public safety than it is to the broader heading of national security. If you Google and look up the word and expression for national security, it generally means the protection and provision of one's national borders and institutions from, in often cases, foreign forces and so on and so forth. But public safety is the responsibility of the government to protect its citizens wherever they are. If I was to take time this morning and traverse from the leeward to the city, to the country, and into the Grenadines, there is hardly a community, there is hardly a space that has not been impacted by a homicide, a murder, a crime in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So while our law and order forces have attempted to suggest to us that there are only 100 or so people who are involved in gangs, and therefore St. Vincent is a safe space, you have to say that to the people of Barley and Lay, of Willand Hill, of Green Hill, of Sharps, of Old Montrose, of Block 2000, of East Kingstown, of Sion Hill, of Upstreet, of Paulclough, of Otley Hall, of Arnoldville, of Poliard, of Mariacourt, of Richland Park, of Greggs, of Georgetown, of Brighton, of Port Elizabeth, of Clifton, and of Ashton. That is an indication that crime and violence has no boundaries, is not limited to 100 actors. It is pervasive and it's extensive, and it must be dealt with summarily. We in the New Democratic Party are not for a moment suggesting that we will eliminate crime and violence. I believe it is scriptural that the poor will always be among us, and the inverse of economic well-being, poverty, may suggest that there may be people who may always fall prey to circumstances. But we provide the assurance we will reduce it, and reduce it significantly, and would manage it, and manage it much better than this is the case now. You may ask why and how. In the same breath that I drew attention to our larger partner, Trinidad and Tobago, I can draw comparisons with our neighbors, Grenada, the same physical size, population size, and economic resources, where I believe as I speak, their records are 14 for there. Do we go there and ask them what they're doing different? Is it the parenting? Is it the church? Is it the school? Is it the police? Is it civil society? Is it all of the above? Certainly, what we have now in St. Vincent is totally unacceptable. So we in the New Democratic Party have been thinking through and thinking aloud. And there are some things that clearly recommend themselves to us. Let me start with one or two of the things which are on the proactive and preventative side. It may sound simple, but we believe there's a truth to it. Idle hands to idle lands, where we have the resources. If we put more of our young people to opportunities, gainful opportunities, there will be less provocation and temptation to go off of the straight and the narrow. We believe that if we use the state institutions and we go back to some of the old cultures and customs, where we broaden and deepen and finance and support and promote, as we have done in the Democratic Party, various apprenticeship programs for our young people, then we are on track to building what in fact must be done. St. Vincent to be a second chance society and opportunity. The young people who have lost their way with the first, second, and third chances, and on whom we have abandoned and or given up. We have to continue to throw that lifeline to save our young people and to save our societies. We saw this, and in fact, there's a 2020 question which was presented to the Parliament of St. Vincent and the Grenadines by yours truly on behalf of the party in our promotion, in which we try to track the numbers in our prisons between the years 2000 to the year 2020. And one can see that there's a gradual progression of the number of young people who now occupy our prisons. Children of the revolution, as they would define it. Well, we are not into the revolution talk. We believe it's more appropriate to promote an evolution from bad parenting, poor parenting, to an ideals of a more equitable society. And you will see that reflected in the New Democratic Party. We, as we try to be prescriptive, would not want to say that we know definitively that it will yield a better result. And so we may well have to consult. But clearly, the notion of providing an amnesty offers itself to us. Whether that should be voluntary or whether we should produce an enticement by paying and rewarding for those who have guns to bring them in and to be paid for them, with a proviso that if you don't, the law will come down at the end where we have revised laws to punish offenders. Will have to be taken into consideration. Now, let me be bold and say emphatically, the police in the most recent statement said that the incident of a week or two ago, and I'm paraphrasing it, doesn't surprise them in that it goes back to some activity a few years ago when coke was being contested for. Well, we have two good statements to guide us. The one that we all remember: if you have too much crime in the land, it's either Toussaint or Mitchell's fault. Well, it holds today. If they're still fighting for coke, it's Ralph and Colin's fault. We must say that to him in bold and uncertain terms. But we cannot let a prime minister of a state who is globetrotting and who is in the face of 5 murders in one night and 11 in a month could not bring himself to understand that he had to cut short wherever he was and whatever he was involved in and return to his home to take care of his citizens. It's not a time for showcasing himself and any poodles. It's a time to do the nation's business. And he must be condemned in the strongest language and terms possible. He has failed, and sufficient reason for he to be asked to resign the office of Prime Minister of Civilians and Independence. On that score alone, St. Vincent is no longer a place where you feel safe in the public. And the New Democratic Party, and I borrow the mantra of Dr. Friday, understands that the one most important action in addressing crime is to change the government. Thank you.
I want to thank Dr. Freddie and MP Nico for their presentations. At this time, if there are any questions from the members of the media who are here, I will take them now.
Yes, good afternoon to Dr. Friday Peters.
Good afternoon,
myself and to listeners. Ashley Peters, I'm representing the news newspaper this moment. On the matter of the CBI program, which has Citizenship by Investment program, which has been a major thrust of the NDP in the election campaign. We've seen some issues coming out of it, where Dominica, for example, they are now required to provide, travelers are now required to provide a visa going forward, and there are some issues definitely with the CBI program. Now, that being, how does this impact your campaign going forward? Because that is, as I said, it's a major thrust of your political campaign.
Well, I'm not sure how that came out of the press conference remarks, but it's entirely up to you to ask a question. But in any event, the matter of the Citizenship and Investment Program is something that we have promoted in the way that the other countries in the region, that is the OECS, have done so and have done so to their great benefit. The integrity of the program depends on how it is run and how it is managed. And you have lots of other countries in the region who are running programs in kids since back in the 1980s and so forth, and they continue to do so in a way that meets with the approval of international agencies, governments, and so forth. So that is certainly the model that we would implement here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It will be open and transparent and subject, because we understand that if you have a program of that nature and you don't manage it properly, you're basically just ensuring that it is short term. It doesn't make sense not to manage it in an open and transparent way. And that is the approach that we will adopt. We will look for the best examples in the region and learn from them, because we are coming late to the game.
Well, as you mentioned, the best example, Dominica, is a model that has been used, and it has been said that there's been abuse in the use of that program. So,
well, then I wouldn't say it's a model, it's an example.
Well, it has been established that they've been using Dominica as the model.
I don't know who they you were referring to. Certainly, as I said, I will look to the best examples for in the region and elsewhere as to how we can construct such a program to the benefit of others.
Okay. Before you go on, because you said you don't know how, my question arose out of what was said at the press conference, but I'm not aware that we were restricted.
No, I'm not saying you're restricted. I answered the question. No?
Well,
if you were restricted, I wouldn't have answered it.
Okay. Well, the mere fact that you mentioned it, I just want to, make sure there is clarification.
I was just curious on my voice.
Yeah, there's another question, actually.
I do. And perhaps this one is too major, because I think it was the 12th of June on Home FM, Major was on, and Lance Weeks called him, and he said that it was a shame that in 22 years since the new administration took office and the new party took office, there has not been a single public accounts committee meeting. He also said that the opposition, you have a very effective tool that you can use in public accounts committee. And he also told Major you can reach out to the Jamaican government, which over 7 years, 6 to 7 years, they've used that. And they were able to get, I think, about 6 or 7 persons fired as a result. Now, Major Lecoq had said, well, he gave the commitment that he will have a discussion with you, on that issue of the Public Accounts Committee in this month, which is July. Has that been done, Major?
Let me answer the question that you didn't ask. First of all, with respect to the Public Accounts Committee, we are on record in the Democratic Party joining to the attention that the government is never audited by the Director of Audit within its electoral cycle. That is, because audits are about 5 years late. You'll find that when you examine facts, that governments are not audited for the cycle. So it's an after-the-fact response. So in order for us to be effective, we need more than one thing to happen. We need that the audit reports, even though they have made improvements, to be more time, maybe a 2 or 3 year timeline, so that at least some period of the audit that has been conducted is within the existing service of the government. So there's relevance. Secondly, we repeat again that we have made strident attempts to have the Public Accounts Committee meet. And we have asked past speakers, Godwin Thomas included, and current speakers, Rochelle Ford, that there should be rules and regulations in place to allow the Public Accounts Committee to meet. We've asked for that for the simple reason that when last we tried to have the Public Accounts Committee meet, the government refused to participate. I remember Minister Francis then, and Slater. not sitting through because they said that the rules in which that was being used were drawn up by Sir James Mitchell and had not passed, adopted by the Parliament. So that is the case. So the Public Accounts Committee, which Dr. Friday and myself have scheduled to have that discussion and how we can go forward and be more effective in its use.
Let me just add something.
Yes, sure.
This is a red herring because the Public Accounts Committee is critically important. I understand that. As leader of the opposition, I am the chair of the committee, but we don't have a majority on the committee. It would still be dominated by the members of the government. But it is untrue to say that we have not tried to have a meeting of the Public Accounts Committee. I was present when Mr. Eustace was, as leader of the opposition, called a meeting of the Public Accounts Committee. We didn't get very far because they raised procedural objections to say that they didn't have any rules by which the conduct of the affairs of the committee can be done, and they have failed to provide any rules since, although they have talked about it. You know, so it's just simply not accurate, and it's a red herring to suggest that somehow the opposition is failing in its duty, when in fact they are the ones. First, Major mentioned the point that the audited accounts of the financial statements of the country, they were 7 years behind, now they are 5 years behind. That means that we would be considering the accounts of the previous government today if you were to have a Public Accounts Committee that was looking at the reports of the Director of Audit.
It will be 2019 to be precise.
So here you go. But that is not all of it. Check in the estimates as well. Under the heading of the Speaker of the House, you will see perennially every year, and go back as far as you want, sometime back, I don't remember exactly how far, I think I went back 3 or 4 years. And you will see there it says in the estimates that one of the objectives of the Office of the Speaker is to ensure that the environment is created so that the Public Accounts Committee can function effectively. Nothing has ever been done. So they have recognized themselves that there is a stumbling block to the functioning of the Public Accounts Committee, and that they need to take action to do it, and they've not done so. And then you have persons who go out there and all high and mighty about how the Public Accounts Committee is so effective, and we're such a democratic country, a country where you can't even get a motion in the confidence to be debated in the House, that suddenly this committee is going to turn the government upside down. Don't fall for it. That is just...
That's what I want to add. No, actually, no.
It's an important committee, and I wanted to function. So let them produce the rules, let them set the environment for us to function effectively. And maybe what we can do is demand them more stridently. And that
before Major continues, what Mr. Weeks was essentially saying, he was actually bashing the government for failing to create what is needed to have the Public Accounts Committee.
Well, I didn't hear that.
And he has more or less
I didn't hear that.
suggesting to Major, look, you know.
I think if Mr. Weeks gets hold of this meeting and he heard that you said he was bashing, he will change his remarks next week. You know, but that's for another press conference. But I want you to be aware. You see, you got to pay attention to Parliament. As often as the government places on the table a financial statement of any government agency, any statutory corporation, the private company of the government, you lay it before the House. You cannot in the Parliament stand up and ask a question on that financial report, because they'll say the rules say that it's not a pretext for a debate. The only time you may be able to use that financial information of a report on a state entity would be our next budget session, or by way of a question in the House. And then they become very limited. So they find ways, you know.
But here is the thing. The Public Accounts Committee is a constitutional committee. It ought to function effectively. And that is something that the government has a responsibility as well, as we have said here, to ensure that that happens. Because when we did, I was present there, I can tell you that for a fact. So don't say that it was never called. And they're the ones who stopped it. And since then, they have not done anything. We can call more stridently for the reform and the rules to get these things done. But the question of the Public Accounts Committee is about financial accountability. We have found other means as well to effectively hold the government accountable for its misdeeds and its mismanagement of the finances of this country. One of it is right now here, we're talking about the National Insurance Service, here at a press conference where people can make their judgment about our comments. We've spoken about it in the House with respect to the way in which they have misused and abused the overdraft facility in the House, the special warrants that they had for years and they wouldn't bring them to the Parliament, where the report of the Director of Audit was 7 years behind. Now I think they're 5 years behind. And they're asking us to essentially do our job in a situation where they have made it impossible for us to do so. But we'll find other ways to hold them accountable, and we will continue to do so.
Thank you for that. Do you have another?
Yes, I have a number of other questions, but I'm aware that I'm in the House of Law. Okay. So Councillor said that, we have that understanding, Kenton and I. Yes. Well, yes. Thank you, Kenton. Major Leacock, do you think that the police force has adequate resources, that is to say, the vehicles and the manpower, to sustain a meaningful campaign, as to say, they want to do a robust response to the crimes, and certainly in light of what happened last week, Wednesday, do you think that they have the adequate amount of resources to sustain a meaningful campaign? And secondly, the approach, because apart from the resources, the approach that they're making, as far as you might be aware, do you think this is what is required?
Well, Ashford, when you were a member of the police force, I think the numbers might have been 5-something, 600, or thereabouts. The numbers today are about 1,200 plus. So they've doubled the force, and with worse results. Okay, crime is far worse than it was then. Now, if you look at the question you presented to me, the police force is a member of the regional security system. So they have assistance that they can gather out of Barbados and from regional parties to help. Other Caribbean countries have done that from time to time to get additional hands-on help. I have spoken with people who would know, and my intel tells me that they are still to deliver a crime plan in the police force as to how to go about the work. But it is instructive to note, Ashford, when I came to the Parliament in the year 2001, the policemen who provide the protection at the Parliament came in what we call the greys and blues. You know what that expression again, how they describe uniforms. And they carried sometimes the long staff, but most times they had the short book. That was enough to keep order at the courthouse. Over time, they moved from the greys and blues to the SSU, camouflage uniform. Those who Ralph used to refer to as the Mongols gang. That's how we call them, you know. And if that wasn't enough, they upgraded to the black squad, complete with the sidearms and then sometimes assault rifles. Do you think they've come there to protect Friday and Cummins and company? It's been an intimidation of us, opposition in the Parliament. Now, extend that and measure what the success they've had on the streets of service in the Grenadiers. Again, I have a paper that I could draw attention to that. They need help within the region and outside of the region. The police needs a complete rethink of the officer corps of the police force. In 20 years of Prime Minister, he has gone through about 5 commissioners of police, from Harry to Miller to Charles to Hanaway to Colin John. And they feel that they all have to be holding on to a Prime Minister to do their police duties. Ever so often, before a person can sit in his seat to develop a work plan for his or her tenure, his retirement time has come. And most of them simply feel that it is necessary to continue where the predecessors left off. We need to get a police high command with officers becoming officers far earlier than is currently the case, maybe in the 30s. That means the way people become officers in the force has to be thought through and changed. In the United States of America, in Canada, United Kingdom, the world's first countries, you can become an officer in the world's first fighting force in the 20s if you go to an officer course, a leadership course, a training course to become a leader. We get that position in service when you're ready to retire or you have paid enough patronage to the government of the day. And that is fundamental to how we stay and direct the police force. I'm told that in the police force on top things now, when senior officers give instructions to juniors, they slam the party card on the table and say, talk to that. So to improve the police force, they still have to first improve themselves. They have to look inwards. There needs to be a cleaning up of the police force. Obviously, there are parties that endear themselves to me. I look with applause at the way the traffic department, for example, seem to be more efficient in the way they conduct themselves. I look at the police force, the way the quality of the uniform they're wearing and their uniform. But I don't think that they're given proper consideration. Look at the stop and search sometimes. Who they stopping and searching? And what time they searching? When you think the criminal elements go to work? 4 o'clock in the evening? And 5 o'clock in the evening? Or you go into a show in the Victory Park and they ask you if you walk with your weapon. So you want to disarm the people who should be in a position to protect themselves against the criminal element.
Just for clarity, who slams the card? The superior or the
Who
junior?
is?
Who slams the party card?
The juniors. Slam the card to the seniors. And I tell them talk to that. That happened. It happens.
Okay, Ashford, I'm going to allow for just 1 or 2 more questions from you this time, if you have any more.
I have more questions, but I'm not sure that Major finished responding to what.
Do you have a clarification?
I'm saying that they have enough access to regional and international bodies for assistance in crime solutions and stop and search and getting on top of the crime situation.
Okay, but why then, you might not be able to answer it as such, but do you see, or whether a new Democratic Party government go towards seeking assistance from the RSS? Because just before you on, the Prime Minister did say that they're going to ask for technical assistance in investigations from the RSS and Canadian authorities. But do you see the need for RSS members, for example, to be on the ground to assist in the patrols and so on? Because I mean, you're talking wear and tear on vehicles and on the human personnel. Yes, 1,300 officers may seem a whole lot.
But they must sleep.
But you have to sleep, and we're talking about a plural country. So,
But the police themselves will tell you that there are a number of ways in which they can give themselves a slack. For example, the diplomatic corps utilize a lot of the specialized tactical unit, the special service unit, to do guard duties. Many of them are of the view that they could be relieved of those responsibilities by franchising that out to private security companies, which themselves need to be regulated and upgraded to be able to do. Because sometimes when you look at some of what now passes from security companies in town, you feel more insecure than security guards. But that is something by itself. These security forms need to be upgraded and regulated to have certain standards. So you need to have more boots on the ground, and that you can therefore tap into the security forces. But here's where we separate. We think that crime is a problem. The Prime Minister says that it is not a problem because once you know of the problem, it's not a problem. Once you know of the crisis, it's not a crisis. So he has a propaganda looking for a solution. We have solutions to real problems.
But clearly, Ashford, we know very well that the use of scientific approaches to investigation is critical. We don't have proper forensics here. If you're asking about getting assistance, of course, that's an area that we would invite and welcome assistance, and we would create our own capacity in that area, because obviously you have to go that way. You can't just rely on somebody giving you evidence that somehow gets thrown out at some point in the court. It's as a witness, I mean. So those are things that need to be done, and it's an area that we've said that we will give priority to, because you have to detect, prosecute, and convict, so that you have a higher percentage of convictions, which then becomes a deterrent for persons who are of that mind to commit certain offences. That is what deters people. It's not the severity of the offence entirely. It's the likelihood of being caught and prosecuted effectively. And if you have a situation where 25% of the homicides, they have somebody arrested, then that doesn't really act as an effective deterrent as if you had 65% or 80%. Or any offense for that matter, break-ins, brachial larceny, it's a fundamental, it's a fundamental fact, is that you have to be able to prosecute and convict at a high degree to deter persons. Otherwise, you can have a more severe sentence and people think, well, you're not gonna catch me, it's not gonna happen to me, so you take a chance.
Thank you so much.
Unfortunately.
I'll stay here and let Sam allocate too.
Thank you very much. Maybe if I ask Ms. Kinkington what my quote is, so maybe tell me what to pass. I was just saying that maybe Ms. King can indicate how many questions
Go ahead, Kenton, ask your question.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Kenton Johnson, private ministers in the Caribbean Media Corporation. Dr. Friday, on the issue of Ms. Charles's appointment. The Constitution is clear on the criteria for this position. Do you think, has your party given thought to approaching the court for a resolution of this?
We're looking at all options, Kenton, because you're quite right. The Constitution says a public officer. The duties that are outlined in I think it's Standing Order 9 of the Standing Orders of the House clearly require that that person be impartial and professional. And similarly, on their own website of the House of Assembly, talk about the duties and the role played by the clerk, require a person in that position to be above reproach when it comes to political partisanship. That is not there now. And I would expect that, in terms of how the appointment was done and so forth, I don't know the internals because I've written to as I said, the chairman of the Public Service Commission, who is responsible for the appointment. I've not yet received a response, but I would expect that possibly the Public Service Union or the members in the public service might be looking at that as well for themselves.
You said in your comments, could she not find a more suitable position, something to that effect? So the question that comes to my mind immediately is, did she give herself the job? As a consequence of that, are you suggesting that she should have determined of herself that she was unfit for the office?
Yes, obviously. I wouldn't apply for that position. I would encourage anybody to put yourself in that position. Because, the website is still there. You're campaigning on behalf of the European. You're coming to the clerk of the House and saying that if you want to be that, to be a partisan activist on behalf of your party, choose that. But then you put on a robe and suddenly you become something different. And you're asking a member of the opposition whom you're campaigning against on your website to come to you for assistance, as we have done in the past with the clerk of the House, without any question as to whether the propriety of the response would be questionable. Now we can't do that. It's just not reasonable to expect persons to do that. So surely, there's some things that you can as well say, listen, let me, if you want, people want to encourage me to apply for this position or to help me to get this position in terms of recommendations or whatever they want to do, then let's look for something else. There are other ways in which you can award party lawyers.
The union did say that the position was not advertised as required by law. Have you looked into this?
Well, they would then have, as you know, in the case, the very important case of the Public Service University Public Service Commission, that the Public Service Commission was slapped on, more than slapped, was rebuked very severely by the court. In terms of the way in which they have managed promotions, the way they have manage hirings and so forth where positions are not advertised. And the court basically said that they had to reform the way in which they do things. And that is something that they have to apply. That's the order of the court. And this is, I think in the letter of the statement that was put out by the Public Service Union, they did make reference to that. So certainly, the circumstances under which the appointment was made, as I said, I have not received a response from the commission, the chairman of the commission, but I would expect that others would be asking those questions as well, and they should be. Because there, as I said in my statements, we are a country of laws. Whether we're dealing here with, the enforcement of the criminal laws, we're dealing here with the public service regulations, how they are applied and so forth. We have to follow them. Otherwise, you're going to have people having to come to court all the time to essentially enforce their rights when the state should recognize them and act in accordance with that. So we will find out more as to how the appointment was made, and I'm sure that the public service will probably make that.
I'm looking at this and the actuarial review. I know you did say that the opposition did not receive any of the previous reviews under the administration. But were you able, through your political intelligence or other sources, to find out what were the recommendations of the intent?
No. But we will follow up on that now, because now that we have this, and we see what the actuary said here, that this matter should be put on the website, there must be transparency. And it didn't just say this report, it said an actuarial review reports during such consultations. That is to say that they must make those public, they must make people aware of them. Other countries, they're on the website. You can have access to them. I don't understand, this is why I refer to it as the NIS acting like a Roman kingdom, that they're preserving information because this is their institution, the board is entitled to it, the government is entitled to it, the management is entitled to it. Well, the people who are the contributors, who the fund is theirs, it's there for them, they're the ones who are most entitled to it. But it's not available now. Just this morning, I decided to check to find out if it's available when this report was published 2 years ago. 31st of August 2021, and they said, put it on the website, it's still not there. And even though it's been presented to us in the Parliament. What is the big secret?
On the issue of the piece,
Can I just say something on NIS? NIS receives income from the contributions of employees and that of employers. And then it takes as well those income and the investment, which they call the investment income. But there's essentially having three streams of income to a national insurance scheme: the employees, the employers, and the investment income. I haven't really heard people ask, what is government's input? What is government's input to the social security of 80% of the nation? What do they put into it? They take out. We all know what to do and how much they take out. But people just seem not to have stopped for a minute. What does the government really put into the social security of the citizens? It's the employees, the employers, and the investment. They then borrow it and abuse it. And it is something that really has to be re-examined, because when one looks at the national budget and how much of taxpayers' monies are put into taking care of 5,000-6,000 people per year by way of being public servants or getting a government gratuity and this sort of thing. Measure that against what happened to the rest of the population, who takes care of the rest. You have to look after yourself. You have to look after yourself. And it's not a very sexy question. That matter arose a few years ago in the Parliament when I was on the floor, when I made the Lotusism statement. And two of our distinguished economists in the region, went back to the same CBI, will say it may well be an opportunity for regional governments to begin to take some of the proceeds of CBI contributions and put them into social security systems to show them up. And that was being examined and was scoffed at and laughed at. Because the same Dominica makes $400 or something million a year from a CBI program. We needed another 200-300 Antigua syndicates. And these are systems that have been in place for the last 30, 40 years, longer than the banana industry or any other commodity industry in the region. And we don't even want to ask whether there's more in the mortar besides the investment. Is it just simply the CBI function that has led or leading to this matter? You know, I don't want to stray. But what is government's input into social security to look after the 80% of the population who must depend on it? They take out. I don't know what they put in.
The Prime Minister made a comment recently about, he spoke to some recent developments, the killings in Kingstown, the attack on the Cubans, and he mentioned even what he called the unauthorized destruction of the items on the Brighton Beach. And he spoke about them happening at a time when they were quote-unquote political operatives from outside of St. Vincent on the ground. And he said they were not allied to his party, the Unity Labour Party.
Well, go ahead.
Did the NDP have any such operatives, and do you think that there is some political element to this crime and violence, the attack on the Cubans?
Well, I mean, I can see the logic of your question coming from, I suppose, insinuations, but as you articulated it, it just sounds like such a ridiculous comment for the Prime Minister to have made without bringing out any sorts of evidence. Certainly, and that has nothing to do with us, obviously. You asked the question, but it's not a situation where I think there's any credence that can be placed in it without more information. And if he has information, he presented. I saw a written account of the question that was asked and his responses and so forth. And he doesn't even seem to know what he's talking about, because he's very vague and very, maybe it may not be and so forth. So it's just simply, it's really not worthy of much comment.
But do you think at all that there is a political element to the crime, the killings, the attack on the Cubans, or even what happened in that Brighton Beach?
I don't know what the causes of the individual attacks are. The point is that if the Prime Minister, Minister of National Security, thinks that there is some sort of a causal link between so-called operatives that he's talking about, and that is part of the solution, you should discuss that with the Commissioner of Police. Exactly. And they should proceed with that in a way that is part of the investigation, not with some loose comment in public. Again, that just seems to trivialize to me the seriousness of the problem. Blame everybody else except the taking responsibility for dealing with the problem. And that is what has been so frustrating and disappointing. And I'm using here probably language that could become even more striking, because it's just simply not, given the severity of the problem, those kinds of responses don't match in terms of the kind of rigor that's needed to be brought to the problem to solve them. It is just not the way to approach it.
It reminds me of the Glenn Jackson killing. There was an assassin's attempt. Remember that? The famous assassins.
Yeah.
And my penultimate question, Major, because you spoke about, well, my understanding of what you were saying is that we need to, well, I guess it's the same thing the government is saying, but you seem to be suggesting something different. That you deal with crime first by preventing children from becoming criminals. Is that essentially what you're saying? And then you're saying that the proposals of the social and redemption charter would help in that regard.
But we're not saying the same thing, first of all, Kelton, because we presented evidence and factual matrix to support that many years ago. where we stated that it cost $13,000
No,
then.
if you permit me, I'm just trying to summarize that. Essentially, listening to what you presented is that both the government and the opposition, they're saying that there is a very significant role for the family and other institutions to play. But what the opposition is saying is that we have a focused plan to help to shore up these institutions so that young people do not become criminals.
The short answer is prevention is better than cure, yes. But
Okay,
would you allow me to say, Kenton, that?
But let me ask a question and you can choose to respond. My question is, right, to the extent that we have a certain number of young people who've already fallen through the crack, to use a cliche, and are exposed at risk of becoming or are already involved in criminal activities. If the NDP gets into office, and as Dr. Friday has said, that you accepted, you become the Minister of National Security, how do you address the existing crime situation in that regard, while at the same time trying to prevent more young people from becoming criminals?
Well, we'll become engaged with the society and the stakeholders. That's what we said. It's not a quick fix and one size fits all. And that's why we said that we've been looking at, we've been crunching numbers, and we've been using our own intel. And it didn't seem to be keen on me saying it, but I said, to the extent that we support the notion that the preventative action is better, we would argue that where you're going to spend $13,000 to $15,000 per year to keep a person in prison, and you're only going to spend the $5 to make a person a good scout, cadet, girl, guys, pathfinder, whatever it is. Spend more money on avoiding social deviance by promoting these groups and organizations through what we call the social spiritual redemption charter. That's part of the provision that we had. Apprenticeship programs, job opportunities programs, supporting the homes, one employee per household. That was a policy the Democratic Party had, for example, because we feel healthy and wealthy households produce less crime and people are attracted to criminality. And so there's a whole menu of options that are available. And we can use what we know, and we can research that which is out there. Scandinavian countries, for example, have a much better experience than we have. And we have to go out there and search for answers. We can't just figure that we could just take Band-Aid and Africa that we will live happily ever after. We will research these programs.
If I might, add to what Major has said there, Kenton. You will recall that last year I made an address on the crime situation in the country. And there were a number of recommendations and approaches that were articulated there. And some of those are dealing with the short-term situation, which is a crisis that we're in. So yeah, obviously, more policing in targeted ways, having forensics utilize those that are offered to us to be able to detect and solve crime, to have a program of effective community policing. I heard the commissioner talking about that recently. You can't solve crime on your own. Will you just figure that out? When you have police officers at odds with the community, why are they going to come and assist the police, even when they are the victims of many of the crimes? That is something that needs to be done. That trust has to be rebuilt. That will take a longer time, but it's not as long term as some of the other solutions we're talking about from the family and the home and rebuilding those preventative measures. So we have, in a sense, you have the immediate response to the current situation, more effective border controls, because we don't make guns in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. How are they getting in? You know, that is something that needs to be dealt with effectively. That takes a regional approach. And we have to have a situation where persons who are willing to provide information and so forth have protection so that they can be able to assist the police in solving these crimes. So there's a short-term issue that is in response to the crisis that we are in now. But Major is absolutely right. I mean, long-term is where the real solution to crime is to giving people a stake in the economy, giving them options so that they can become more productive citizens, that they can get a piece of the pie, so to speak, by going legit, by doing it the way. that they've been taught when they're in primary school and from their grandparents and at church and so forth, and that they don't when they get older stray into the antisocial criminal activity as a way of getting a piece of the pie.
My final question in relation to the Public Accounts Committee. It's two-part. Do you think that the government has orchestrated this situation so that it is as it often is not? And to the extent that it seems to have worked to the benefit of the government, why, if the NDP is elected to office, would you then ensure that it functions?
I would ensure it because it's a
Why?
because it's a constitutional requirement. We're about good governance. It's not about basically getting back at the opposition. There will be a different set of people in the opposition in any way. A lot of them fellas will be gone because they intend to win all the seats. So here. Just let me just finish your comment. But the point that I'm making, Kenton, the Public Accounts Committee is a very important institution. It is constitutionally required, and it is part of our accountability mechanism in our system of governance. And so, of course, it has to be healthy and strong. And if it finds ways, that's why it keeps government. You hear me talking about, when I talk about the guardrails that we have built up. We inherited some of them from the British, we have created some on our own. The guardrails that we have to essentially keep government, that is the finance minister and the government, within a certain set of parameters to function. You cannot have operating, for example, an overdraft account where the government says this is the amount that we've spent in the overdraft, and the bank says this is the amount. And every year there is a variance in that amount that adds up now to over $100 million, and they keep trying to explain it as a clerical error. Somebody didn't record it properly. And then you have the parliament says you could only borrow $60 million or $50 million as overdraft. You could use that essentially to offset the inflow and the outflow of money that the government has. That's what an overdraft does. It's not additional borrowing. It's just a temporary financing measure. And it's supposed to be reduced back down to virtually zero by the end of the year. They have made that now into a source of revenue that they don't come to Parliament to get approval for. So when the overdraft got to $98 million, they just cut off a part of it and made it a permanent loan. How can you function like that? You know, you've had special warrants where they're supposed to come to Parliament, say Parliament approved a certain amount in the estimates. This is what you spend for this. They say, no, we need more money. The law allows for it. But it says you have to come back to Parliament with a supplementary estimate to get that done. They have not done so. They have abused it. And so we get in this situation now where you have, the government has no money to spend because we are in a really terrible situation. And it's something that they created because they felt that they had the power to do certain things, and rather than do what is right, they did what they can do and do with, as they see, with impunity. There's no impunity here. There's a cost to be paid, and we all are paying it. So you asked me the question as to why I would do it. I would do it because it's the right thing to do, because it's a constitutional requirement. We should have an active and properly functioning Public Accounts Committee, and all the other accountability mechanisms should be in place to hold government in check. I will not be in government forever, and I want to make sure that the country, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, is going to be a country that governs itself on the best principles that we can learn from other countries. That's what takes us forward. Sorry.
I want to thank Dr. Friday. If you may allow me to just wrap up the live stream. I want to thank Dr. Friday for their comments, and I want to thank the members of the audience, both on Nice Radio and also on our social media networks who joined us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lavon, for your